When I was in my early 20s, my cousin Cody and I went on a few camping trips around Colorado. This particular incident occurred, I believe, in Ural Forest when I was 22 and he was 23. It was my first camping trip, but not at Cody's. It was in the middle of the week. Our jobs allowed us to take days off in the middle of the week, and we'd frequently go on campouts then to avoid traffic and crowds. Always let Cody lead these trips. He's the Eagle Scout, not I. We parked near a picnic area and walked into the woods from there. After about 15 minutes of hiking deeper into the woods, we discovered a good spot to set up camp, which meant a large enough clearing to accommodate 2 tents, the portable stove, and a campfire. The first thing we did was unpack our belongings and pitch our tents. Cody has always been much faster than me at pitching a tent. He takes only a few minutes. It always takes me more than 20 minutes, or at least it has since I haven't been camping in the wilderness. The next step was to build a fire ring out of stones, followed by gathering sticks and wood. He did bring some fire starter and a lighter, so I guess we kind of cheated, but that's okay. It was nearing the end of the day, and we had a fire going. Cody was now grilling steak and burgers. Cody was always generous with the food on these trips, and he's an excellent cook, so I trusted him to feed us. Of course, we had bear spray in case the smell of the food drew a black bear, which Cody said was extremely unlikely. He always says that the most important thing to consider when you're out in the woods is other people. As we ate our steak and burgers, we opened some beers and listened to classic rock on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you don't know how enjoyable it is to be in the wilderness with a friend or family member and some beers, reminiscing about good times and listening to music. As it got dark, we started playing card games on a small folding platform table we had brought specifically for cards. After playing more traditional card games, we began playing Uno. This was when we heard something in the woods. I paused the song on my phone so that the speaker went silent. We could now hear a person humming and footsteps beyond the trees in the pitch-black forest. Cody urged me to locate the flashlight. I tried, but by the time I found it, the sounds had vanished. Asked Cody if that was something to be concerned about, and he said it was extremely unusual for someone else to be this deep in the woods, let alone creepily walking by a campsite with an active campfire and humming. I was shaken, and I could tell Cody was too. We returned to playing cards, with much lower music. When we least expected it, a large stick landed in the center of our campsite, making us both jump out of our skin. It didn't fall from a tree. Someone threw it at us. Cody began yelling something along the lines of, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life." And then footsteps could be heard in the distance, leading away from us. I suggested we pack up camp and move somewhere else, but he said no way in the dark. We both had bear spray, and he suggested I keep it next to me in my tent when we went to sleep. It was the closest thing to ranged self-defense weapons that we had. We kept hearing sounds like tree branches cracking in the distance, sounds you wouldn't expect an animal to make. Someone was out there, possibly multiple people. That much was certain. We had to go to sleep eventually, so we decided to take turns staying up to keep watch and ensure that no one came to our campsite and stole anything or worse. Cody agreed to take the first watch, saying he'd stay up to read his book. So I crawled into my tent, then my sleeping bag, and fell asleep. Getting up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. You're in a cold outdoor environment with an uncomfortable sleeping bag. Any number of things could wake you up. I wasn't sure what woke me up. I was still in a fog, and my brain didn't feel fully awake yet. When I looked up, I noticed a head peering into my tent that resembled Cody. Rubbed my eyes, but the darkness prevented me from seeing his face. I said, "Cody," thinking he was waking me up to take my turn keeping watch. I asked, groggy, "Is it my turn?" stared at the head peering at me in my sleeping bag, gradually becoming more awake with each second. Then I heard the tent zipper zip up quickly, and his head disappeared. I briefly returned to my sleeping bag. I had a strange moment of clarity in which I jumped to an upright position and listened as the footsteps moved away. I said, "Cody." He didn't respond. I unzipped my tent to check out the campsite. The fire had died, and Cody was not present. I went over to Cody's tent, which was zipped up. I unzipped it and found Cody fast asleep in his sleeping bag. I got chills, goosebumps, or whatever you call it. Almost peed myself when I realized this. I began shaking him awake, and when he awoke, informed him that someone had arrived at the campsite. It took him a minute to realize what was going on, just like it did for me. But once he did, he grabbed his bear spray. He stated that he must have dozed off while reading. He suggested I sleep in the tent with him tonight, but I'd need my sleeping bag. He joined me outside the tent and kept watch as I dashed to my tent to retrieve my sleeping bag. I was in my tent, grabbing my sleeping bag, when I heard the Dan humming from outside. I grabbed it, and Cody whispered to me to hurry. Said, "You hear that too?" He replied, "Yes." We both returned to his tent and zipped it up, holding our bear spray cans at our sides. Tell you, in those moments, all I wanted was for a bear to come and save the day. I stayed awake while Cody slept, and the hours passed slowly. After 3 long, horrible hours, I woke him up and we switched. When Cody woke me up, it was nearly dawn, and there was light outside, so we packed everything up, and by the time we finished, there was enough light to hike back to the car. We could have driven somewhere else and spent another night camping, but neither of us felt like it anymore. This was a haunting experience, and I believe we both wanted to be safe in our homes. It's been 6 years since this happened, and he's mentioned camping to me a few times since then, but I haven't been particularly interested since. People are simply too scary. Why was someone stalking our campsite? The sight of that person's head in the dark, staring into my tent, was straight out of a nightmare. I may never go camping again. When my friends and I rented a beach house in Florida, I had no idea how things would turn out. It was just the 4 of us in a cramped car driving there. The house was right on the beach, on a road with the bay in front of it across the street. The backyard was literally a beach. There were some large houses on this road, as well as some smaller, more normal-looking ones. This was one of the more modest-looking options. It had 4 bedrooms, 1 for each of us. The houses on this road were spaced apart to create a sense of privacy. There was no traffic on this road while we were unloading the car out front. The interior of the house was adequate. It was not spectacular, but it was modest and clean, and the owners were heavily promoting the beach theme with the wall decor. I suppose it would make sense given the location. There was even a decorative surfboard in one corner of the living room, behind the television. The living room looked out to the back deck, which in turn looked out to the beach. The view was breathtaking. The deck was not very high off the ground. It was just 2 steps down to the sand. We all claimed our bedrooms. I was able to get one of the rooms with a view of the beach. Of course, the first thing we did after settling in was go for a walk outside and lay down on the beach. We all got in the water at one point and then played football. We were definitely at the beach for a few hours. We appeared to be the only ones on the beach, with the exception of this older-looking couple way down the beach. After that, we went out to eat and then started bar hopping around town. It was dark outside when we returned via Uber. We went outside on the beach to have fun and play late-night football while we were drunk. While running to retrieve the ball after missing a catch, I noticed something in the water. The moon's reflection on the ocean was the only way I could see it. I said, "What the?" out loud before realizing it was a person standing in the water about waist deep. My friends looked over and confirmed what I had seen. It was only a little weird because it was past midnight. But hey, if a local wants to go for a midnight swim, that is their choice. We then went to sit on the deck and drink beers until we were tired. Everyone began to retire to their rooms one by one. My friend John and I were the last people out there. I had been glancing in the direction where I had previously seen that person in the water, just out of curiosity. So when I cast a glance in that direction, I noticed someone standing on the beach. They appeared to be simply standing there, facing us. It was creepy. Perhaps a neighbor. I didn't want to be rude, but I was curious if it was the same person. We tried to ignore it, but John was looking at that person, and after a while, he said they were still standing there facing us. I stood up, looked over, and realized he was correct. I yelled, "Is everything okay?" John inquired, "Why'd you do that?" I honestly had no idea what to expect. They did not respond at all. Even though we were officially creeped out, we went inside. Travis and Liam were already in their room, most likely passed out from drinking. So John and I decided to call it a night so we could have a full day tomorrow. If I had to guess, it was 12:30 to 1 o'clock a.m., which was actually on the early side, but we were all exhausted from the long day. I went into my room after brushing my teeth. I looked out the window, wanting to see the ocean before going to bed. The creepiness factor increased significantly because someone was now standing in front of the back deck, facing the house. They seemed to be looking at my window. The person's figure appeared to be male. Given the slightly larger frame, it was undoubtedly the same person as before. I called John's name, but he didn't answer, so I dashed to his room and pounded on the door, telling him to come out. He came out quickly, and I directed him to my window to look out. But now the individual was gone. I swore to him that the person from earlier was still standing in front of our deck. He believed me. We were not about to go outside and look around, however. I took one more look to make sure they were still gone, then closed the blind to the bedroom window. But as I lay awake in bed, rolling from side to side, attempting to sleep, I couldn't shake the sensation that someone was still outside. Who was that person? Why were they creeping around? My thoughts were interrupted by the horrifying sound of a fist knocking on the bedroom window. I felt as if my insides had shriveled up and my heart had completely left my body. Lay silent and frozen. A few moments later, there were more light knocks on the glass. I didn't dare to lift the blind because I lacked the courage to do so. I nearly yelled, "Who is it?" but stopped myself. Instead, I dashed out into the living room, screaming for everyone to wake up. Everyone came out of their rooms, one by one. There was no one at the window when we checked. We all went out on the deck and turned on the lights together. We looked out onto the beach and saw no one. We also inspected the front and sides of the house. No one. John and I had to explain to the other two what they had missed while asleep. We left the backyard lights on that night. The next day, John and I went to our two nearest neighbors and asked if they had also had someone knock on their windows or doors. One of the neighbors told us about a truly bizarre encounter he had a week earlier. Someone knocked on their door in the middle of the night, and when he asked who it was, they wouldn't answer and just kept knocking, so he didn't answer the door. I'm not sure if it was connected, but if it was, that just makes this even scarier. We spent the rest of the day at the beach, exploring nearby towns and visiting bars. Nothing occurred that night. We left the following day. I still wonder what I would have seen if I had opened the blinds. I was 9 years old when this occurred. For whatever reason, I was home alone one night and spent it playing video games in my room. I wasn't allowed to answer the door to anyone when I was alone at home. I was rarely left alone for long periods of time. My mother would just be out grocery shopping or something. I was playing Metroid Prime on the GameCube. Used to be obsessed with that game. I heard the house phone downstairs begin to ring. My mother always instructed me to answer the phone if it rang in case it was her calling. So I hurried downstairs, and by the fourth ring, I had picked up. The caller ID was from my mother's cell phone. She blurted out, "Sweetie, can you come outside and help with the groceries?" I responded, "Mom." She replied, "Yes." Her voice seemed off to me. You clearly recognize your own mother's voice, and even at such a young age, when I wondered why it didn't sound like her. Asked, "Why do you sound like that?" She said, "Like what, sweetie?" And I hung up. My mother would never use the word sweetie so casually, let alone twice in a row. The phone rang again, and my mother's number appeared on the caller ID again. I ignored it. My heart was racing, and I was nervous. I sat in the kitchen, waiting for the phone to ring 3 times, and it did. It took a few minutes before the third ringing, but when I checked the caller ID, the number was different. I picked up, and a man's voice on the other end said, "Hey James, I know this is going to sound strange, but it's your father." I am outside. All I could utter was a weak, "What?" The man said, "I'm outside. I have a lot to explain." I hung up right there. My father died when I was 3, and I have no memories of him. My suspicion was correct. The first voice I heard was not my mother's. The phone rang once more, followed by another. I ignored it every time. I couldn't even call my mother because someone obviously had her phone. Then things got worse when there were knocks on the front door. This went from Somyeon has my mom's phone to Somyeon is outside the house. My mother would not be knocking on the door. She would have a key, obviously. I peered around the kitchen wall to see the front door. On the other end, I heard a man's muffled voice call out my name. He was saying, "It's your dad." He rang the doorbell, and then I heard him try to open the door. I did something no 9-year-old should ever have to do. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. The 911 operator asked me what I expected to be fairly standard questions, most notably instructing me to wait in a bathroom or other room with a lockable door until the police arrived. The bathroom is on the first floor of the house, and I hid there with the lights off. Whoever was outside approached the window and attempted to pull it open. I heard the entire struggle. Then they must have moved on to the next window. I believe they tested every window and door in the house. If anything had been unlocked, the story would have ended very differently. They must have given up before the police arrived. And I say they because this clearly involved 2 people, a man and a woman. They could have been out there for all I know. The operator informed me that the police were at the front door and that it was safe to meet them there. Only hung up the phone after I opened the door for the police. They conducted a quick investigation inside and outside the house, asking me where my mother was supposed to be and whether she knew anyone who might want to harm us. I'm sure I said I thought she was going grocery shopping or something, but I am not sure. When my mother saw the police cars out front, she panicked and returned home with my younger sister. My mother's phone was stolen, which was already obvious. I'm confident that our address, home phone number, and other personal information were stored on the phone and easily accessible. I'm not sure how they knew my name. Something on my mother's phone must have given it away. It was an old Nokia flip phone. Who stole it was unknown, but my mother's phone background was a photo of her with my younger sister and me. This could have indicated to some disgusting, creepy couple out there that the owner of this phone was a single mother with 2 young children, and they attempted to use that as a ruse to trick me into leaving the house, which is absolutely disgusting and horrifying. The phone must have been destroyed after the failed attempts to lure me outside. Things changed slightly after that. My mother would not leave me alone at night again, not until I was at least a few years older.